I had promised a video on the chronology of Brexit in a live stream, and here it is. The deadline for Brexit has expired. Britain is going its own way. Until shortly before the end, it was unclear whether a deal would be concluded. The chronology from the first referendum in 2013 to the current standards is what I've got for you. The Brexit debate has dominated daily events not only in the UK since 2013. In the EU too. Great Britain's exit from the EU repeatedly caused debates and disputes. Great Britain left the EU on February 1st in 2020. On January 1st in 2021, the country left the customs union and the internal market of the EU. The purpose of the transition period was to ensure that the contracts for economic cooperation did not break off from one day to the next. Until the last moment, British representatives and EU diplomats fought for a joint exit treaty. The negotiations were tough. The negotiations only ended on Christmas Eve with the TCA now. On December 30th, 2020, the UK House of Commons approved the Brexit Trade Pact with an overwhelming majority. In the second reading, MPs voted 521 to 73 for the EU law presented by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Important changes affect the goods trade, logistics, aviation and the financial sector. These are the consequences of the Brexit deal for companies. Experts anticipate long-term negative consequences for the UK economy. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, on the other hand, is trying to sell the deal as a success. Truck jams are expected at the borders, and because everyone involved has to get used to the new border controls, and now after 6 months, it's really whoa. In the first few days, however, there could be less traffic than expected, or there was less traffic than expected because they still had stockpiled and all this stuff. And companies have extended their Christmas break, and drivers were waiting what's really going to happen. How smoothly the transition takes place for Great Britain largely depends on the EU, and we still see that in Northern Ireland. In many areas, there are still transitional regulations so that the cord will be cut off gradually. The chronological summary of Brexit shows the events of Great Britain's exit from the EU in a timeline, starting with the promise of a referendum, the first referendum in 2013, the negotiations back to the current state of Brexit. On January 23rd in 2013, David Cameron calls a referendum on whether the UK should remain in the EU. David Cameron announced on January 23rd that he would renegotiate Great Britain's role in the EU and then hold a referendum for a vote on whether the country would remain in the EU. With this step, Great Britain's then Prime Minister wanted to calm down the EU opponents in his Conservative Party and at the same time counteract the EU-skeptical UKIP. On June 23rd in 2016, the British then narrowly voted for Brexit. On June 23rd, the British narrowly voted for Brexit with a total of 382 electoral districts counted. 51.9% of those eligible to vote for Great Britain to leave the European Union. The UK's withdrawal from the EU is therefore a done deal after the referendum. Then on June 24th in 2016, after the British spoke out in a referendum against the country remaining in the EU, the then incumbent Prime Minister David Cameron announced his resignation from the British government on that day. And on July 13th in 2016, 1 month after David Cameron's resignation, which as I said he did on July 13th, the Conservatives elect Theresa May, who had been Interior Minister until then, as party leader and with that new head of government. After her election as the new Prime Minister, May promises to follow the citizens' vote in favor of the country leaving the EU. At this point in time, however, there is no precise plan for Brexit. Only very few in the British government expected such a result. Accordingly, at this point in time, there are still no precise considerations of the British role after a Brexit with regard to the European internal market or the free movement of persons. And the free movement of persons could therefore be jeopardized by Brexit. On March 29th in 2017, Theresa May sends the official letter of resignation to Brussels. The 2-year period for exit negotiations begins with the submission of the letter of termination. Thus, the date for Brexit and the elimination from the EU is set. On April 18th in 2017, Theresa May announces early elections. Oh boy, yeah, we all remember. With these new elections, the British Prime Minister hopes to expand the Conservative majority in the House of Commons. This would enable them to bring the Brexit process through Parliament without a hitch. Numerous opinion polls had indicated May's victory. But on June 8th in 2017, the Conservatives lost an absolute majority in the general election. The Prime Minister is not resigning despite the severe defeat. The Irish party DUP, meanwhile, assures Theresa May of its support for the minority government. And on June 19th in 2017, the Brexit negotiations in Brussels begin on that day. The negotiations on an agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union on Britain's exit from the EU have been very difficult right from the start, as Britain will continue to trade freely with the EU after Brexit or conclude its own trade agreements with other countries, or would like to do that. At the same time, the British negotiators are calling for an end to the free movement of EU citizens to the island. And on November 25th in 2018, the heads of state and government of the 27 EU member states that will remain met for a special meeting of the European Council. They approved the agreement on the withdrawal of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland from the European Union and the European Atomic Energy Community. The negotiators of the EU and the United Kingdom previously presented the Brexit withdrawal agreement. On January 15th in 2019, the British Parliament votes on the laboriously negotiated Brexit agreement. In December, Prime Minister May postponed the vote at short notice after a clear defeat in the vote for her Brexit exit agreement became apparent. It will be a historic defeat with a clear majority of 432 votes against 202 votes in favour. Over 100 MPs from her own ruling party vote in Parliament against the head of government's Brexit agreement and mutiny against the official party line. A particularly big point of contention is the backstop regulation. The backstop means that if the EU and Great Britain fail to conclude a joint trade agreement in the transition period, the entire United Kingdom would remain in the customs union with the European Union. Northern Ireland would also remain part of the European internal market. An agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union would also be of great importance here for the question of how to deal with the border between Ireland and the north of the island. An unregulated Brexit would create an external EU border between Ireland and the north. One possible consequence in this context would be that border checks would be reintroduced between those two parts of the same island, thus restricting the free movement of people. The European Union, on the other hand, is interested in maintaining this freedom of movement as in the rest of the EU. The backstop remains an important part of the further negotiations. On March 12th in 2019, the MPs in the British House of Commons will vote on the Brexit agreement negotiated in Brussels. And also in the second round of voting in the London Parliament, the Brexit deal was rejected by 391 to 242 votes. Prime Minister Theresa May suffers her second defeat. March 13th, 2019, the British Parliament will vote on leaving the EU for the third time. After the MPs last rejected Theresa May's Brexit plan, a possible no-deal Brexit will then be voted on. The British Prime Minister suffered another vote defeat. The British House of Commons votes against a no-deal Brexit, in response, Theresa May is going on a confrontational course. And on March 14th in 2019, the British House of Commons is in favour of postponing Britain's exit from the EU. With 412 votes to 202, the House of Commons instructs Prime Minister Theresa May to submit a corresponding motion in Brussels. So far, the United Kingdom wanted to leave the European Union on March 29th in 2019. Now it should be on June 30th at the earliest. On March 20th, Prime Minister Theresa May requests that the EU postpone Brexit until the end of June 2019. The Europeans still have to agree to the postponement of the UK's exit from the EU and the request of the British government at this point in time. The EU Commission is critical of a postponement of the Brexit date and counters with conditions for a postponement of the exit date. And then there's March 21st in 2019. The EU is ready to comply with Theresa May's request and give the British more time for Brexit. However, not in the form in which the British government envisions it. There will only be a short-term postponement of the UK's exit from the EU if the British House of Commons approves the exit agreement. Chancellor Angela Merkel also endorses this demand made by the European Union on the British. Shortly before midnight, the heads of government of the EU agree on April 12th as the new target date for Brexit. Britain's exit from the EU will not take place on March 29th. Brexit will be postponed for the first time. March 27th in 2019? What do you reckon? The Parliament of Great Britain votes on 8 alternative Brexit solutions, but does not come to a clear result. Prime Minister Theresa May offers her parliamentary group her resignation if it waves through the exit agreement with the EU on the third attempt. On March 29th in 2019, for the third time, the British House of Commons is voting on the EU exit agreement negotiated by Prime Minister Theresa May. However, nothing changes in the outcome of the election. As before, it is against the exit agreement with 344 to 286 votes. April 2nd, 2019. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May wants more time for the United Kingdom to leave the EU. The Brexit date is shaken again. May now wants to try a different course after the Brexit hardliners in their party failed the EU exit agreement in the lower house 3 times. The British head of government therefore wants to ask the EU again to postpone the exit date. May is also approaching the British Labour opposition, which, however, is making demands. The tension in Great Britain and also in the rest of the European Union is growing. After all, a few days before the Brexit planned for April 12th, it's still not clear how Great Britain will leave the EU. The danger of a no-deal Brexit is therefore by no means averted. Brexit chief negotiator Michel Barnier also considers a Brexit without an exit agreement to be more and more likely. April 5th in 2019. Great Britain's Prime Minister is asking the EU for a short extension of the deadline for Brexit. The EU, however, has extended the deadline by 1 year. In this case, however, Great Britain would have to take part in the European elections. However, many British MPs refuse to participate in the European elections. Theresa May addresses this fact in her letter to EU Council President Donald Tusk. Britain will officially schedule the European elections and instruct the parties to prepare for the election campaign, announced the Prime Minister. However, according to the letter, May's goal is to ratify the exit treaty before May 22nd and then cancel the European elections at the last minute. April 9th in 2019. After negotiations, the European Union agrees to another postponement of Brexit. The European Council agrees with the delay to enable ratification of the withdrawal treaty. It says, the extension of Great Britain's exit from the EU should only last as long as necessary and in no case longer than... The exact date for Brexit is still missing at this point. The heads of government want to insert it personally after the negotiations at the Brussels Special Summit on the evening of April 10th. April 11th, 2019. After negotiations at the Brussels Summit on the night of April 11th, the heads of government finally agreed to postpone the Brexit date and postpone Britain's exit from the EU to November 1st. So, Brexit will be postponed for the second time. The postponement of the UK's exit from the EU will also affect the upcoming European elections. According to this, Great Britain would have to hold European elections if it was still a member of the EU on May 22nd. The British government, headed by Prime Minister Theresa May, had previously announced in a letter to EU Council President Donald Tusk, as I said, that it would organize and hold the European elections in Great Britain should an EU exit agreement not be reached before May 22nd. Theresa May, however, continues to rely on a Brexit and thus on an exit date before May 22nd in order to avoid Great Britain's participation in the European elections. However, if the British Parliament cannot agree on an agreement before this exit date and circumvents the European elections, Great Britain will leave the EU on June 1st. May 7th, 2019. Vice Prime Minister David Lincoln confirms that the UK will take part in the 2019 European elections. The election date in Great Britain will be May 23rd. It's therefore also clear that Brexit is now off the table until May 22nd. May 22nd, 2019. Britain's Prime Minister unveils another Brexit deal. With a new deal, Theresa May actually wants to satisfy all Brexit camps, but she has achieved exactly the opposite. Because the new deal is essentially her old deal in which only a few change requests from both camps are taken into account. The pro-European opposition in Parliament, that means Labour, Liberal Democrats and SNP, will have the prospect of a second referendum, but only if the British House of Commons approves the Brexit law beforehand. The Brexit hardliners of the Northern Irish DUP and the Conservatives, on the other hand, are promised in the New Deal that the British government will intensify the search for alternative solutions for the Irish border so that the backstop never has to come into force. May 24th, 2019. Britain's Prime Minister announces her resignation as Tories party leader. On June 7th, Theresa May wants to resign from her position as party chairman. She wants to remain Prime Minister until a successor is found. So there comes June 7th in 2019. The British Prime Minister follows up on her announcement and resigns from the office of Tory party leadership on that day. But there is still no successor for the office. However, the field of applicants is large. A total of 11 candidates wants to take on Theresa May's position and are positioning themselves for it. Former British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson is said to have the best chance of becoming party chairman. It could possibly move disappointed Brexit voters who have turned their backs on the Tories to turn around. June 10th in 2019. The candidates. 10 Conservative politicians are now officially fighting for the office of Prime Minister to succeed Theresa May. A total of 313 MPs from the Conservative ruling party will vote on the 10 candidates for the first time on this day. In the first round of voting, all candidates who have fewer than 17 MPs behind them are eliminated. In each round, the candidate with the fewest votes falls out of the race. In the second ballot, at least 32 votes are required to remain in the competition. Around July 22nd, it should be clear who will succeed May. Until then, Theresa May, who officially resigned at the beginning of June, will remain in office of Prime Minister. The approximately 160,000 members of the Conservative Party can cast their votes by postal vote until July 22nd. At this point in time, former UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson will be given the best chance. Among other things, Johnson takes the position that he can negotiate a new exit agreement with the EU and insists on a Brexit before October 31st, if necessary, without an exit agreement. The candidate who wins the election for the Tories party chairman automatically becomes Prime Minister and successor to Theresa May. June 13th, 2019. There we have the first round. In the first vote to succeed Theresa May, 3 candidates are eliminated because they do not receive enough votes to advance. Favourite Boris Johnson can clearly win the vote with 114 of the 313 votes. Current UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt comes in second with 43 votes. Agriculture Minister Michael Gove claimed third place. He received a total of 37 votes. Ex-Labour Minister Esther McVey and the former Minister for Parliamentary Affairs Andrea Leadsom do not move into the next round due to a lack of votes. Former Parliamentary Group Leader Mark Harper also fails in the first ballot. Then there's June 18th in 2019. Boris Johnson can also claim the second round of elections to succeed Theresa May. He continues to emerge as a potential successor to the previous British Prime Minister. The former British Foreign Minister received a total of 126 votes in the Conservative Parliamentary Group of Lower House in the second round of voting, and thus underpins his role as a favourite. Secretary of State Jeremy Hunt is again in second place. He gained 3 votes and now has 46 votes. Environment Minister Michael Gove followed in third, and fourth place with 41 votes is Development Aid Rory Stewart with 37 votes. Interior Minister Sajid Javid only managed to exceed the limit of the necessary votes. He claims 33 votes for himself. On the other hand, ex-Brexit Minister Dominic Raab has left. With only 30 supporters, he missed the 32 votes necessary for advancement. June 20th in 2019. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt prevailed over the remaining candidates. Jeremy Hunt received 77 votes in the fifth and final round of voting in the Tory parliamentary group, thus prevailing over Environment Minister Michael Gove. Gove only gets 2 votes less than Hunt. Boris Johnson is meanwhile far ahead with 160 votes of his so far ahead of his competitors. Johnson and Hunt are now running against each other in a runoff in which the members of the Conservative Party ultimately decide. By the end of July, it should be clear who will inherit Theresa May or Theresa May's post as Tory boss and Prime Minister. July 9th in 2019. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn calls for a new Brexit referendum. In contrast to previous policy, he speaks out clearly against Brexit and calls for a referendum vote, against his will probably. The British Labour Party wants to fight to stay in the EU in another Brexit referendum. Opposition leader Corbyn wrote to party members that the future Prime Minister should let the people vote on whether Great Britain should remain in the EU or leave the EU. July 23rd, 2019. The new era, some might call that, in whatever way. Boris Johnson, Brexit hardliner and former British Foreign Minister, wins the election for the chairmanship of the Conservative Party and is thus the new Prime Minister of Great Britain and successor to Theresa May. With a total of 92,153 votes, or 66%, Boris Johnson prevailed against his opponent Jeremy Hunt. Surveys have already shown that the clear majority of Tory party members support Boris Johnson. He is doing justice to his role as a favourite. The Brexit hardliner was able to win all previous election stages with a clear lead over the other competitors. His opponent Jeremy Hunt has to admit defeat, as he can only claim 46,656 votes, or 34% for himself. The turnout is 87.4%. July 24th, 2019. Brexit hardliner Boris Johnson is appointed 77th Prime Minister of Great Britain by Queen Elizabeth II. The former British Foreign Minister continues to rely on the United Kingdom to leave the EU by October 31st in 2019, if necessary, even without a withdrawal agreement between the EU and Great Britain. The risk of a hard Brexit, that means the disorderly exit of the British from the European Union, has increased with the election of Boris Johnson. On the night of July 25th, Boris Johnson's new cabinet was already in place. This is clearly dominated by Brexit hardliners. More than half of the cabinet is exchanged. The personal decision of the new Prime Minister makes the political course clear. The previous Brexit Minister Dominic Raab will be the new Foreign Minister. Priti Patel, also an avowed Brexit advocate, will be the new British Home Secretary. Boris Johnson announced in his first address as Prime Minister to Parliament that he wanted to make Britain the greatest country in the world. Sounds very Trumpian. Boris Johnson wants to renegotiate the EU exit treaty. However, the EU sees no reason to move and to negotiate a new agreement, as the British Parliament had previously spoken out clearly against leaving the EU without a treaty. Boris Johnson cannot enforce the no-deal Brexit against the will of the House of Commons. August 21st in 2019. Boris Johnson travels to Berlin to see Chancellor Angela Merkel. Great Britain's Prime Minister previously announced in a letter to EU Council President Donald Tusk that he wanted to reopen the exit treaty. The EU must recognize the fact that the backstop for the Irish border cannot be part of the treaty. Accordingly, the backstop must be replaced by alternative arrangements, Johnson writes in its letter. Berlin government circles, however, make it clear before the Prime Minister's visit that Germany shares Donald Tusk's position. The EU Council President reacted coolly on Twitter and wrote, "Those who reject the backstop and do not propose a realistic alternative support the establishment of a border, even if they don't admit it." Chancellor Merkel also makes it clear that she is sticking to the backstop clause in the Brexit agreement. August 28th, 2019. Prime Minister Johnson asked Queen Elizabeth II to end the current session of the British Parliament in the second week of September. Despite the opposition protests, the Queen nods off the Prime Minister's request. Parliament will not return until October 14th. September 4th, 2019. Boris Johnson fails twice in front of the British Parliament. The MPs in the Parliament building are taking the next steps to dissuade the Prime Minister from his Brexit course. Boris Johnson is continuing his course undeterred and is doing everything in his power to leave the EU on October 31st, if necessary, without a Brexit deal. Some parliamentarians unauthorized to bring a bill before the way, according to which the British government has to show a deal with the European Union. If this does not happen, Johnson is to request another postponement of the Brexit date until January 31st, 2020 in Brussels. Boris Johnson, however, sees the danger here that serious negotiations with the EU will no longer be possible. If all three readings, the parliamentarians approve the draft law against the no-deal Brexit and thus oblige Johnson to postpone Brexit if he has not reached an agreement with the EU by October 31st. This would rule out the no-deal Brexit. To save his Brexit course, the Prime Minister is proposing new elections. According to this, Great Britain had to decide who should travel to Brussels. If Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister, after the planned new elections on October 15th, we will leave the EU on October 31st, the British Prime Minister announced. However, the proposal after early elections or for early elections fails in Parliament. September 10th, 2019. Parliament. On the last day before the forced break. The British Parliament inflicted 2 more significant defeats on Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The government's request to hold new elections on October 15th, 1 day after the forced break, was rejected. Although 293 MPs voted for the motion and only 46 against, it still did not receive the necessary 2/3 majority. In addition, the no-deal Brexit law came into force around noon, blocking all paths to a hard Brexit for Boris Johnson. If the UK cannot reach an agreement with the EU by October 19th, the UK will have to request a 3-month delay. September 11th, 2019. The highest Scottish court stands behind the Brexit rebels and declares the parliamentary recess illegal. Now the highest authority has to decide. The Scottish court brings Britain's Prime Minister the next defeat. Boris Johnson's declaration to the Queen is unlawful and is therefore null and void, it says. The Brexit chaos in Great Britain is meanwhile getting bigger and bigger. Whether that means that the MPs can return to their benches in the London Palace of Westminster and continue debating is now to be decided by the Supreme Court in London. September 24th in 2019. The Supreme Court ruled and overturned Boris Johnson's forced break in Parliament because it was unlawful. Literally it says there that the compulsory break is illegal, void and ineffective. After the resumption of work in the British Parliament, many MPs are calling for Prime Minister Boris Johnson to step down. October 17th in 2019. The new Brexit agreement between Great Britain and the EU is in place. Michel Barnier, EU chief negotiator for Brexit, and his British counterpart Stephen Barclay have managed to agree on a regulation for the future EU external border in Ireland. Under this arrangement, Northern Ireland will remain in the EU customs territory and the European single market until a free trade agreement between the UK and the EU is concluded that covers that. The Brexit dispute seems to have been resolved. However, there is still one hurdle. At this point in time, the British Parliament still has to vote on the Brexit agreement agreed between London and Brussels. The MPs last approved this in London. It is the first Saturday meeting of the House of Commons in 37 years, but the Northern Irish party DUP has announced that it will vote against it. They were against it from the start because the regime economically separates Northern Ireland from Great Britain. Labour and other parties also want to vote against the controversial deal. If the new agreement does come into force, there should be a free trade agreement by 2023 at the latest. October 19th, 2019. The British Parliament is postponing the decision on the Brexit agreement again. Prime Minister Boris Johnson was only able to win over 306 MPs, while 322 MPs voted for the let-win motion, which provides for a postponement of Brexit. The decision on Brexit should only be made once a corresponding ratification law has been passed. After his defeat, Johnson is obliged to apply to the EU for an extension of the exit period beyond October 31st. Shortly before midnight, Donald Tusk confirmed receipt of the application via Twitter. In the motion, Johnson asked for the Brexit date to be postponed to January 31st. Johnson does not give up at this point, however. October 21st, 2019. The Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, rejects a renewed vote on the Brexit deal. Bercow cites the unchanged circumstances compared to Saturday as the reason. Instead of voting, he proposes that the ratification law be passed. October 22nd in 2019. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has suffered another defeat. After a majority of parliamentarians voted in favour of the government's Brexit bill, a second round of votes narrowly voted against Johnson's schedule for leaving the EU. Johnson's schedule was to allow Brexit on October 31st. The decisive factor now is whether the EU agrees to an extension of the deadline for the exit. I was watching Parliament all the time that time. That was quite exciting. October 24th. The 27 ambassadors of the EU agreed to postpone Brexit, which means that Brexit will be finally not over on October 31st. How long this delay should be had not yet been decided at this point in time. October 28th in 2019. All remaining EU states are in favor of a Brexit postponement until the end of January 2020. After France initially voted against a postponement, President Emmanuel Macron is still in favor of Great Britain remaining in the EU by the end of January at the latest. This is the fourth time that Brexit and the elimination of Great Britain's membership of the EU have been postponed. October 29th in 2019. With 438 votes to 20, the London MPs are in favor of bringing forward the elections actually planned for 2022. A new parliament will be elected in Great Britain on December 12th in 2019. The Brexit deal agreed between Boris Johnson and the EU is therefore probably off the table for the time being. December 11th. The past few weeks in Great Britain have been dominated by the Brexit election campaign. One day before the general election in Great Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservatives are ahead at this point in time, according to a poll by the polling institute YouGov. However, the lead of the Conservative Tories seems to have melted recently. At the end of November, according to a similar poll, the Conservatives had a majority of 68 seats. Now the lead is only 28 mandates. They would therefore have 339 out of 650 seats. The opponent Labour, on the other hand, has increased significantly and, according to estimates, has improved by 20 seats to 231 seats. The parliamentary elections are therefore more exciting than expected a few months ago. And right before the exciting elections, we all know it's a very long video already. Not so many will watch it that long. And I don't want to totally tire you with that one. So I make it a two-part video. And you're going to see the second part tomorrow morning. So you won't miss anything. But we'll start with the elections tomorrow morning. So I'll see you then. Auf Wiedersehen.